All right, ladies and gentlemen, and robots, whoever you are that are joining us tonight, I'm so excited. This is a gentleman I have been looking forward to speaking with for a very long time. Devon Eriksen, how are you tonight? Beautiful bookcase, by the way.
Thank you. I am doing awesome tonight, and I am glad to be here.
Oh man, I love to hear that. And for y'all that were, I've had some comments lately, especially from Tim, my guy here, who's already is like, uh, my new "Come On" song. They were saying, there's some ads in the way, so I was hoping you guys got to hear it because my guy DB Rook, one of my good buddies, his band Terminal Sun did that. Beautiful. But back on topic, Devon Eriksen. So there's a couple things I've learned about you, and we'll kind of start at the beginning. I like to start at the beginning. We'll get into the meat and potatoes, if you will, during the chat. Um, John says, "Time to fire up the ocular implants." Yes, and forget the face is just outside the bulkhead waiting. Yes, my guy John, love it, man. Devon, I don't usually ask this question first, but I think it has a little bit to do with, and I could be wrong. This is just me kind of taking my own thoughts. Kind of go into what you did before writing this book, as a career. I feel like maybe that had a little bit of inspiration or somewhat to do with you writing. Am I right or am I wrong?
I've had a number of careers, the latest one being software engineer. And that engineering background did equip me to write a few things. And way back at the beginning, though, before I had a career at all, I was the son of one of the lead engineers on the Voyager spacecraft project.
That's awesome, dude.
So I got to hang out at all of the Voyager press conferences and see the pictures of the outer planets coming up, just as everyone else was also seeing them for the first time. So that was very exciting. And I developed the notion that we're going to go out there someday. We're going to live out there someday. So I wanted to write about it.
How young were you when you were introduced to these obviously philosophical and incredible notions?
6, 8. The Voyager spacecraft took sort of a long time to do their thing. So this was from when I was a very young child all the way up to high school, basically.
Wow. So I can just imagine, I was born in 1990, and the first time I remember seeing something space related, was probably, I'm just going to be honest, was like the movie, was it Apollo 13? Yeah,
Yes.
I remember watching that and just being in awe. But then I would watch the replays of, was it the Challenger that exploded?
Yes.
Okay, that hit me kind of hard as a young man. And it was shortly after 9/11. That was probably the most traumatic event that got me. I don't know why it got me interested in space, but it did. Like the more important ideas and thoughts and creations in this world. But that's it had to be incredibly foundational for you to see and try to understand and be influenced by it at 6.
Oh yeah. Well, in the later half of the 20th century, we were all Gen X. We were all growing up with this sense that our lives were not going to be the same when we were older as when we were young. Nothing was going to be the same. We had this sense that we'd seen the history of the 20th century and how we'd gone in something like some handful of decades from the Wright brothers to landing on the moon. And we had this sense that the future is going to be very, very different. And we are going to experience that. And some of us are going to be part of making it that way. And there were some decades in the early 21st century when it looked like that sort of wasn't happening because we left it to the government, and the government did what it always does, which is drop the ball. But now
Yeah.
we have private industry moving in, and we have this exploding at an incredible pace. And just, we're talking about going to the moon again. We're talking about going to Mars. We're talking about all these possibilities for mining the asteroid belt. All of the exciting things that can be done outside of Earth's gravity well. And
It's su-
we're
Go
seeing
ahead.
the technologies as well. We're seeing the biotech, we're seeing the AI. So it's like the future is back on the menu, boys.
I love that, and that's exciting too because it, I try to put myself in the perspective of a couple generations ago or decades ago, where these things were simply an idea that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't possible. And I love kind of putting myself in those positions and then jumping forward and seeing what we see today. You've got Elon Musk, you've got Jeff Bezos, you've got the other gentleman, I can't remember his name. But it's a commercial, exploration of space, and it's just mind blowing to me. So watching this in real time has been incredibly cool. I want to put up Johnny Douglas, Time to Fire Up. Oh no, I already put that one. Sorry, I'm reading his book right now, and all that pedigree he's talking about shows through in damn near every sentence. Yes, I would agree. From the opening sentence where there's a ham sandwich being eaten by I hope I'm saying this right, a gene twist or a
Yeah,
gene.
gene twist in the scenario is slang for someone who's been significantly genetically altered before birth. So she is a post-human.
Yeah, it's just those type of ideas where it's just you start a book, and usually it doesn't start with such a broad a kind of imagination filling idea, but I love that. And I was kind of almost spoiled it before we came on. But sci-fi wasn't something I thought I'd be interested in. And I've said this a few times on my channel, but as of about 6 months ago, I just cannot get enough. It has broadened my mind to a point where I didn't think was possible through the written word. Um, Now, did you have a similar experience as a young man, or when did you find that passion for literature? Period, even if it wasn't sci-fi at first.
Well, a lot of what made me decide to be an author when I retired from software engineering. Could I have the light up a little, please? Thank you. Um, was the time I spent in libraries as a child and as a teenager, just sort of in the back of the stacks with these big piles of science fiction classics. Everything from that golden age from the 1950s on to the sort of the 1980s cyberpunk stuff, all of that. And I I missed that sensation. I wasn't done with it yet. And the publishing industry consolidated to the point where what was getting published was reflecting the sort of the worldview and political opinions of people who lived and worked in the same 20 blocks of Manhattan, and they all went to the same parties. And eventually I said, okay, they're not feeding this appetite anymore. Fine, I'm gonna do it
Yes,
myself.
there you go. I love it, and you make a really good point. Uh, the thought process and these philosophical points that I also noticed as a young man were being told and explored by the same, like you said, the same 20 blocks of Manhattan. And
Yep.
I think that there's
Yeah.
lots of things, self-publishing, especially in your case. But go ahead. I didn't mean to
And
cut you off.
and these are people, in these big five publishing houses. These are people who don't want to go to space. and they don't see why anyone wants to go to space. And it's a little bit difficult to wrap your mind around. It's
Yeah.
like, how can can we develop a prosthetic imagination to implant in these people?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there is, and this is absolutely true, there is a species of goldfish that only lives in a pool that is in a very deep crack in the middle of Death Valley.
Wow, really?
Yes, absolutely. It is a separate species of goldfish. And if you are one of these human beings that says, why would we leave Earth? It's so hostile out there. You are that goldfish. Think about that. You are that goldfish. You are looking outside and you are saying, gosh, it's hot and dry out there. Why don't we stay in here? And you are in a puddle in the middle of Death Valley. And the rest of the world, the rest of the universe is out there waiting for you. And you're just looking out the door and going, gee, gosh, it looks kind of vacuumy out there. Why would anyone want to do that?
Right.
It's a complete failure to imagine the possibilities.
I think it takes somebody with balls and the imagination and the willingness. Again, it kind of goes back to balls to say so, that type of statement, because I don't see, when I watch the news, I'll tell you this, I don't see a lot of, we're pushing the lines of science. We're pushing the line. And now I know some of that's going on, but regular folk, you and me, I'm not putting you in that category. Me and other people I know, I think that it's incredibly inspirational to hear, that analogy you just came up with about that. I had no idea about the goldfish, because that makes for the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It really does, and it inspires me and so many others.
Staying where you're comfortable is dumb. It's for cowards.
I didn't realize that myself. I'm 33. I just realized this. Making yourself uncomfortable is one of the greatest things you can do. When I started this channel and as a novice fantasy sci-fi lover, again, I found my love at 29. That's what I was going to say before, but I wanted to save it. I'm 33. I've only been reading hardcore and had this passion like 4 years.
Yeah.
So talking to guys like you and others really inspires me, because this is a lifelong thing. So it thoughts, your processes, and I mean, yeah, it really just brings me to that point that I'm on this quest for knowledge and inspiration. And I love point of view too. It's like, you've been an engineer, so you get the technical side of things. So to kind of push the boundaries, along with your personal thoughts and those analogies you come up with, is incredibly special. Now, Corey asks a wonderful question, a wonderful indie author. Did the future scare you as a kid, and later did it disappoint you as things turned out differently?
Well, I think that fear and excitement kind of go together. And because anything worth being excited about is found outside your comfort zone. Because, if it's inside your comfort zone, you've experienced it before and you're not excited about it anymore. So, there were always risks. I mean, I grew up during the Cold War. And so, you always had this worry at the back of your mind that things were going to go very badly. And, I don't want to overstate that, you didn't live every day in fear, but you knew that the world was a dangerous place and that technology contained the potential for monumental screw-ups. But at the same time, you knew that, like, okay, technology is advancing all the time because that's what humans do. Ever since we learned to, like, bang the rocks together,
Right.
our means of survival has been to look at the universe and think about it and try things and discover new possibilities. And so I wouldn't say that I was disappointed in the future as certain groups of society decided to sort of put the brakes on things as much as they could. I was disappointed in those people. I thought
Yeah.
they were cowards. I think that saying, oh, we need to fix things here on Earth first, or, AI technology might be harmful, so we need to neuter it. I think that's just cowardly. It's cowardly because you're refusing to do something based on this vague imagination of dangers you haven't even seen yet. Going outside of your comfort zone is always dangerous. That's why, that's what uncomfortable means, is that
Sure.
you're in danger, you're taking a risk, but nothing worth doing is accomplished without taking a risk. And it's taking risks that took us from, chasing antelope around and wearing hides and dying of rotten teeth at age 40 to where we are now. This is humanity's evolutionary strategy, like it or not. So, either you're busy doing that or you're busy dying. And I have no patience for people who want to reduce the population of the human race, scale back what we're doing, produce this kind of steady state humanity where we live on one little tiny dust mote in the cosmos, in little villages with solar panels on the roof, waiting for the next asteroid to come along and wipe us out. I despise those people.
I think that's a great point. I didn't do well in this class in high school, but I learned so much in astrology or astronomy.
Astronomy.
Yeah, not astrology, people. Sorry, astronomy. It was one of those classes that helped me to. I had no idea how far my mind could kind of think, and it was real. It was so incredible, and to think. I often ask people these questions, like the philosophical questions, because I'm so into that. Like, do you think we're the only things out there, or do you think that this little, if you really understood how big the universe was, which nobody truly can do, but you can try and you can learn and realize the universe is ever expanding, and we are so small where we are. It's just really cool for me to think that there's got to be bacteria, there's got to be some other living form out there, because we are so small in comparison. So I think that's another reason why sci-fi has become somewhat of a love of mine. Well, very much a love of mine, because it gives me that excuse to dream in a realistic way.
Yeah.
Michael says, tell Devon thanks for making sci-fi cool again. The rest of us indie sci-fi writers are picking up extra readers from him, bringing fresh readers to the scene.
I love that. I love that so much, because something I've said repeatedly is that I'm not in competition with good writers. I am in cooperation with them, because good writers make people want to read books. And there is no way I can write enough books to keep a single reader entertained with something to read all the time. So I want there to be more good writers. I'm not in competition with them. I'm like, we need to expand the market together. Get people excited about reading again. Get people excited about imagining possibilities again. I'm in competition with bad writers. People who people want to stop reading books and go sit on the couch and watch a movie. And, I would say that most of those bad writers are being crammed down people's throats by the big five publishing houses where,
Right.
they're not filtering for quality. They're filtering for something else.
Yeah. And that's a wonderful point. And thank you, Michael, for saying that, because I had a very similar thought. And it just kind of goes to show not only like the passion you have for what you're doing, but the reason you're doing it. Like, I really kind of knew a lot about you just through your book and kind of doing subtle research. I don't like to do a whole lot of research about an individual before I interview them, because I like to kind of have an honest representation. And I could tell the kind of guy you're passionate, you know what you want to talk about, and your fans seem to really recognize that. And it's very easy through your writing to recognize that.
I think science fiction readers are smart. I
Yes.
think anyone who gets pleasure by reading, where it's a little enough effort for them that they can really enjoy themselves while doing it, these are smart people. You don't have to hold their hand. You can just show them something and they get it. And you talk about being passionate, and one of the things I noticed sort of in the political malaise of the early 21st century that we're kind of coming out of now.
Yeah.
It was very cool for a while, because I think younger people especially had this sense that they were living in a society that was in decline. And it was very cool for a while to be cynical. Like I'm going to not like anything unironically.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be enthusiastic about anything, because then I can be mocked for it.
Right.
And I can be criticized for it. And my visceral response to that is, it's not cool to be a coward. It's not cool to be somebody who doesn't have the balls to stand up for anything. So I would say that, yes, I am straightforwardly enthusiastic about what I am doing. I am passionate about what I am doing. I care deeply, and I won't pretend not to.
I love that. And I have to say, like, going through that experience you literally just talked about, like going through high school, I had it kind of just shows you the point of view through teaching, or through the people you surround yourself with. Through high school, I didn't think, of course I thought, but I think you understand what I mean. And when I got out of high school, being around people who push the boundaries of thought, critical thinking, just encapsulates.
Yeah, you realized you had been that fish in that puddle in Death Valley.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It's like there is so much more to the world. And I feel a lot of sympathy for people who grew up in the 21st century, because, the political scene was dominated by clowns and criminals, and and there was this sort of cynicism about everything, and all the inhabitants of these major institutions that previously had society's trust were sort of just trying to liquidate those reputations and that trust into cash as fast as possible. And that's why we've gotten to the point where, even like, there is no Harvard anymore. There is only Zool.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I feel a lot of sympathy for people who grew up in that space, because it makes it very hard to realize that there is any other way. Being Gen X myself, I grew up, during the Cold War, which was a period of a lot of threat, but we also had the feeling that we had something worth fighting for. We had liberty. We had individual enterprise. We had capitalism, which is one of the greatest inventions of mankind. We had, we had so many things that helped to build brighter futures. And despite the fact that we had for a couple of decades a little sort of a step away from that by these sort of ex-hippie boomer
Yeah.
types, that doesn't last long because it doesn't work. So
As somebody who was
I am really glad that some people who are not old enough to remember the 80s are now getting to experience that kind of optimism that we had then again.
because through teaching, it was like, okay, this is only what's possible. And that's, again, I grew up in the age that you're speaking of, and it took a lot of, hey, I'm going to research things myself. I'm going to make my own narrative.
I thought you
It,
said you were 33.
I am 33. Yep.
Okay, I was talking about the 80s.
Yeah, I was not in the 80s. Nope. I
Okay,
was born in 1990. What I'm saying is I was taught a lot of
you absorbed a lot of the cultural material from there.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
I had lots of teachers that kind of didn't lead me the way that I would lead kids nowadays if I were a teacher, to where think on your own.
Yeah.
Outside of politics, outside of what I would say that I went through, especially in high school, these closed-minded thinkers, and kind of do your own thing. And that's kind of where I went, especially with reading, because it's not always the narrative that you hear on your TV, especially nowadays. Like, I just feel that it's, maybe I'm not saying this right, but I find myself as an individual exploring ideas on my own, doing research, real research, getting facts.
Okay, well, let me see if I can sort of try to articulate what I think you're saying.
Yeah.
The 20th century had these sort of a lot of the communications technology of the 20th century was radio and television. And these are one-to-many media. And so it becomes very easy to control the narrative and to either straight up deceive people or simply present your version of events, because you only have to control a few voices that are speaking, a few sources of information. And then when the internet came along, the internet is a little more like books. It's a many-to-many communications medium. So now the viewer or the listener or the reader has a lot more choice about what to attend to. And now we can choose to listen to all sorts of different people who are saying all sorts of different things, and we can curate our own informational experience. And I think what I hear you saying is that when you got an opportunity to do that, that really took off for you.
Yes, 1000%. And you articulated that very well for somebody who's not well spoken. I love that. It became this whole other world for me. It became this expanding of what I thought it was possible to the millionth degree. So it really took off for me. Now, I have to say, I have people in my life, like friends from high school, who haven't necessarily been on the same journey as I have, and kind of believe what they're told to believe. And that's just not the path that I'm on. So I really enjoy books like yours and ideas like yours going forward in life. And what I want to teach my kids: think for yourself, and not just the narrative that you hear on the news or your teachers, but explore those ideas and get your own idea about those.
Oh, yeah. Government schools do not give you an education. And education does not mean telling you what to think or what you need to know. That was the kind of education that, say, classical societies that Romans gave to slaves.
Yeah.
Because a slave is a human machine who will be doing the same thing his whole life. And an educated, and typically the full gamut was only given to gentlemen of the era, but the principle remains the same. The educated gentleman could expect to be doing many different things throughout his life, need to do many different things throughout his life, and he would need to have the agency to go and self-start and do things, and he would need to have the ability to learn whatever he needed. So that is an education, and that is what it is important to give yourself if your parents didn't give it to you, and what is it is important to give to your children. This, how do I learn? How do I engage with the world? How do I have the courage to take risks? How do I allow my curiosity to guide me to understand the world more fully? What subjects do I need to learn that are truly fundamental that enable me to do that? Things like, you go to a government school, they'll teach you math. They'll teach you a certain kind of math. They'll teach you a certain kind of history. They'll teach you how to read and write, but they won't teach you rhetoric, and they won't teach you logic. And, these are the things that would enable you to kind of see what's going on and make decisions for yourself. Lots of people are lining up to give you an education that will make you useful to them. No one is lining up to give you an education that is useful to you. That's up to you, or if you're lucky, your parents.
That's solid. I love that. I'm gonna have to go back and get that word for word. I love that. The education they want for them, but not the education they want for you. 100%.
Yeah, and it's good to be useful to people. It's you don't thrive well in a capitalist society if you're not useful to other people. You want to be useful to other people, but you want to have control over how you are useful to other people. And that starts with being useful to yourself.
Oh, man. Yeah, dude. Fire. That's fire. Josh Eatbook says, Devon, you have a very nice voice. I think you'd be an awesome audiobook narrator. Just saying. I think he's right.
Thank you. We are in process of getting an audiobook for Theft of Fire put together, and I will be reading a few minor parts. I will not be reading the main narrator. I found an excellent voice actor for that who has a good voice as well, but he's much more of a voice person than I am. And I found two excellent actresses for the other two major roles. And so I'm very excited about that. I went from, I guess some people like having an audiobook. We should kind of try to do that, to listening to all these auditions and finding a few of them that made me go, okay, wow, this is going to be good. And I am going to direct it myself, and I'm going to make sure it's right.
I love that, because I can tell you that you are a man that will make sure that's good. And I love that about you. And I knew that about you even before talking to you, just based on the way that you write, based on the way that you've conducted your website. You're a man that I can tell wants to do things the way that you feel is right and the right way. I love that.
Yeah. Well, credit where credit is due.
Yes.
It's not all me. My wives have been very active in supporting me. One of them is doing the website and managing some of the audiobook stuff. No, that's Sarah. The other one, Christine, is doing a lot of my scheduling and planning and marketing and getting me on awesome podcasts like this one, and just generally being superhuman on the publicity front. Because otherwise, none of you ever would have heard of me.
She does an amazing job. Now, Sarah, I can also say now that that's an amazing job as well. But Christine is the reason, again, why you said, scheduling things, making sure things are on point.
It's not enough to just produce something good. People have to know that you've produced something good. And that has to be sort of that publicity. And it's not just publicity, it's trust. It has to be built piece by piece. The way I put it is as an author, I'm not in the book selling business.
Okay.
That's not what I do for a living. I'm in the brand building business, because, and what building a brand really means is building not only public awareness, but public trust. Because I sell like an ebook for $10, trade paperback for 20, hardback for 30. That dollar amount is not a big ask.
Sure.
People spend that every day.
Yeah.
But there's much more reluctance than that to pick up a book by a new author. And the reason is that people are not just spending their dollars, they're spending their time. They're
Lots of
spending
time.
their time and effort, and they want to know that that will be rewarding. So that brand building for authors, and I know a lot of you guys out there listening right now are indie authors, so ears on that. What you need to do is build that trust, that time spent with you will not be wasted. You need to demonstrate that you can do this. And that is a difficult proposition with people who have never heard of you. But that is the discovery problem in indie publishing. And, TradPub has it as well, since they don't really support you for publicity anymore.
Yeah,
but
not anymore.
That is your major task, is building an audience. Because once you have an audience, they will pay you again and again and again, and be happy to do so because they love what you do. So, number one, you have to produce something that's awesome. It's not enough to be okay. You're asking for 20 hours of the reader's time.
At least.
You really have to respect that. You have to be good. You have to be a perfectionist. You can't just bang it out, do one editing pass and move on. That is disrespectful to the reader. But then number two, once you have that quality, you have to go through this piece by piece process of building trust, getting an audience, using that to get more attention, building trust with those people over and over and over again. And Christine has been a critical element of making that happen. And then I've been able to come in with these new people who are paying attention and say, okay, I'm going to write something in public. I'm going to say some things in public. I'm going to convince people that time spent reading my work will not be wasted.
People, I'll just say from my personal experience, and it's one of those that I'm very passionate about the sci-fi genre. I'm passionate about the fantasy genre as well. But I always find myself most passionate about that new love, right? Sci-fi is that thing, and reading Devon's prose is quite the experience. It's very fun, and I think the coolest thing is, like, if you are talking about something that initially I'm like, what's that? I'm not questioning for very long, because you do a good job of explaining and storytelling at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a trick to that.
I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And since we have a few indie authors in the audience, I will go into this because, I love to talk shop. One of the things that will often make readers sort of nope out and experience something as a bad book is if they come across these big lumps of exposition or really like a big lump of anything. Because what you're doing is, sure, you have to explain things to the reader. It's science fiction. It's not the same world that they live in. They need to be told things. But if you encounter a big lump of exposition, it stops the action. So you need to think about when the reader needs to know things. And I like to think of it as making baklava. You know what baklava is?
Of course I do.
Yeah, everybody knows what baklava is. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So baklava consists of these really, really thin layers of
Thin.
phyllo dough and lots of honey and nuts, and all this stuff is really tasty. But if you took a big lump of phyllo dough, boom, and poured some nuts on top of it, and then poured honey on that, would you eat that? No, it'd
Probably
be
not.
terrible.
Right.
Because everything's in big lumps. You have to mix it into little fine layers. So the sensation you're talking about of, oh, I see something and I don't quite know what it is, and then it gradually gets explained later,
Yes.
is me breaking the exposition up into little tiny thin layers that I then stack, with the nuts and the honey of some of the other things like character building and the plot and dialogue and so forth. And as you experience that, it makes the exposition painless to absorb, but it also builds trust. And then when I start having people, refer to technologies that haven't been explained to the reader yet, or something goes on that you kind of understand a little bit about it, but you don't have the full background, that trust is built. And it's like, okay, this is going to become understandable.
Yes.
Everything
100%.
is going to become clear. And then that process of finding out becomes fun.
It does. And I have to say, I've read sci-fis that I ended up liking, but I didn't end up loving. They kind of dropped those balls of dough, right?
You get the thing where there's the television tuned to the convenient news channel, or there's an early scene which involves like a professor giving a lecture or a witness testifying in front of Congress. And it's just science, 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 tech, 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 explanation, explanation, explanation. It's like this cheap trick that some writers do, where it's like the first thing the first person protagonist does in the book is look in the mirror. And then you get a 2-page description of exactly what they look like and how they're dressed. It's like boring.
Yes.
You have to be willing to trust the reader that they can follow along with you, and they can wait a little bit to find out all the details. You give them what they need to know, and then you space it out a little bit. So you give them something nice to experience instead of this big, unadulterated chunk of homework that you're giving them before they can enjoy your book. That's disrespectful.
Right?
It's a waste of their time. It's lazy.
And it confuses the reader as well. It's not something that I'm not a big DNFer, if you would, but it's like one that I may put down for half a year and maybe do some research and come back to.
Yeah,
but
I'm
I didn't feel that.
DNFer. I DNF
a lot of people
lots of stuff.
Yeah. Lots of people are that way. And I have to say more now than I was at the beginning, just because I was starting to review books. You want to give everything a chance, but it's like once you kind of find the way that you learn through a book, and as a writer kind of explains things to you, just like you said, a little bit at a time, and it becomes pleasurable. It's fun to read. I think that's very important. So let's kind of go back to this as a sci-fi, or we could put fantasy into this, anything, or true crime, whatever it was for you. What were some authors or books that really were foundational for you?
Well, there's books that taught me sort of the craft of authorship.
Okay.
And there's books that really fired my imagination as a reader.
I think the second part is what I'm speaking
of. There's books that were both. And the truly great books are the ones that were both. Larry Niven.
Ooh, that's a
Uh,
new one for me.
yeah, Larry Niven's Ringworld, as well as something he did with Pornell, A Mote in God's Eye. Science
Ooh.
fiction classics. I also like some Heinlein. And one that many people will not have heard of is a sort of a mid-list author who never developed a following really worthy of his talent because he's so eclectic and he keeps switching genres.
Mhm.
But Walter John Williams. And because he jumps genres so much, even I don't read all his stuff because sometimes he's writing in a genre I couldn't care less about.
Sure.
But his science fiction and fantasy and some of the stuff that he's done that blurs the line between the two, just amazing, amazing, amazing craftsmanship.
Wow.
Hardwired, Voice of the Whirlwind, Metropolitan, City on Fire, great stuff. Great
Wow.
stuff. Also fond of the early William Gibson stuff. Zelazny was a favorite. So
That's incredible because I hear lots of it being somewhat new to this. It's like I get a lot of the same names, but these, I have to be honest with you, I haven't heard of any of this, which is the best thing.
Yeah,
I've been waiting for a lot of new names to kind of put on my TBR to experience and get the influence that I know that you've gotten.
Well, one of the things I did in Theft of Fire is I hid a lot of Easter eggs in there that are references to some of the books that inspired me.
Okay.
Mostly, but not all, science fiction. So you, of course, being new to the genre, will have missed most of these.
Probably.
But a lot of, the sort of super fans of science fiction out there are having a lot of fun finding, oh, I see what you did there. Although there are a few references that actually have not been found yet.
That's got to feel cool, right? And you're waiting for that.
Yeah, and I'm waiting for that. And it's like I think the other day, Eric S. Raymond, the open source guy who I am friends with, he texted me to point out an Easter egg that he had found. And I was like, you're the first one to notice that.
That's got to be so cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I think that, science fiction is serious because it helps us to think about the future of technology, and it helps us to develop this vision. But serious and fun are not opposites, and it's got to be fun.
It's got to be. Yeah, it's got to be. But for me, and I know so many others, this reading thing is a passionate thing, but also it became passionate through fun. It became passionate through escapism.
Yeah, it's pleasurable. It's really, and this is why science fiction, people who read science fiction read fantasy. It's why those two align so closely, because I actually believe that science fiction is a subgenre of fantasy.
Okay.
And the way I would define fantasy is any story where the universe of the story is so different from the reader's universe that the author has to make a conscious and sustained effort to explain the universe.
I think that's a good way to explain it.
Yeah, it's this new universe fiction. It's this sort of super genre where every book you pick up is going to introduce you to a new possible, or maybe not so possible, maybe fantastical universe. And there's a group of people out there who just love that. They love being introduced to these new possibilities. They love the mental exercise of imagining this totally different place where the laws, the culture, the biology, and maybe even the basic physics are not the same. And you, with the help of the author, have to figure it out. But you get to visit the ultimate in exotic locales.
Yes.
And that's why fantasy and science fiction get shelved together a lot of the time, because the people who love one usually love the other. And when they love both, it's because they love that experience of being taken to an exotic universe.
That's what was different for me at first. At first, I loved fantasy, but I hadn't tried sci-fi.
Yeah.
And now I get it, right?
Yeah, it's the same sensation.
It is. You get this picture. I think people from my generation that grew up in the 90s and 2000s, like the early 2000s, get this vision of just Star Wars.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like that is the picture.
Yeah, well, and
so
Star Wars is a little bit more like fantasy.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, well, I don't want to say it's great. I want to say it was great.
Right. Yeah.
Because I saw all the movies, the original trilogy, like when they came out in the theaters. That was my experience of them. This was a new thing. And, that's great stuff. But a lot of science fiction, the alternate universe comes from a very, very different place, from a more of a scientific speculation. And, I love some space wizards with laser swords. You can do great stuff with that. But I went in a very different direction, and I worked out all the physics, and I tried to make it all very, very possible and very, very plausible, even to the guys who like to check your math on the back of an envelope as they're reading.
Well, you've won an award that says that you've done that right.
Oh yeah, the Atomic Rockets stamp of approval. This is a website run by someone by one Winchell Chung. Very, very awesome dude. He's just written all sorts of things about the physics of all different aspects of space travel, and that is such a helpful resource to an author. And then when somebody writes a book where they get the physics really, really well, he will award that book the stamp of approval. And I have one, and I'm very proud of that.
As well as the Prometheus.
As well as being a finalist for the Prometheus Award. We still don't know who's going to win, but I am in the final 5, which allows me to say, I beat Salman Rushdie in a writing contest.
That's so cool, man. When I saw the award for like closest to actual scientific accuracy, that is very, very cool.
Yeah. And it's you sometimes get that from readers as well. I mean, I had some Amazon review from some woman who said, well, I'm an asteroid scientist and everything he wrote in here rings true. And she goes on in some detail, and I'm like, okay, well, anybody can say on Amazon that they're an asteroid scientist. So I'm going to check this woman out. I'll find out if she's lying. So I search her name, and these publications start popping up under, a slightly different version of the name. And I'm like, okay, these are all, this is a planetary scientist. She's writing about asteroids. Oh, and here's an asteroid named after her.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That's serious.
I buy this.
Yeah.
And it was like she was saying, everything that I was saying was either proven or plausible. And I was like, yes. And then there was the ex-Air Force combat pilot who said, oh, those space fight scenes with the acceleration, I felt those. Yeah.
That's gotta feel cool, man.
Yeah. Well, that's what you become an author for, is that feeling, because the odds of getting rich are very small. You always swing for the fences, but the odds are not good. Sure. It's that feeling of what I wrote, what I dredged out of my subconscious resonated with someone else. And that is an unbeatable feeling, because there's two things that create real happiness. And those are a feeling of accomplishment and a feeling of connection with other people.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
writing gives you both.
I like that. I'm so glad that you inserted that, because you're so right. When it comes down to it, those are the two things that would really make me, as an aspiring writer myself, some guy, I hope to publish a book one day. I'm very new at this, but I hope to gain the knowledge through guys like you to do such a thing. And real quick, I want to say, John, have a wonderful interview, my guy. Have a wonderful time. He's a huge supporter of the channel. I'm a huge supporter of his. You have a wonderful night, man. He's reading your book, Devon. And I'm guessing, Samoki, dude, you're his guest tonight. So you guys go have a fun time, guys. Thank you for tuning in till you had to leave. That means so much. Another wonderful, wonderful woman, huge supporter of the channel. I'm a huge supporter of hers. This is why I run away with writing hard sci-fi. I can read it, understand it, but I have no faith in myself to write it. Well, everybody's different.
There is a big internet out there, and there are a lot of resources, including the Atomic Rockets website. And you also have a lot of control over how deep you go. There is no guild of hard science fiction where I and a couple of my friends are going to be sitting at a massive table,
Sure.
interrogating you. No, this is not worthy. We will not let you into the guild. It's something that you can do selectively to inject believability into your writing. So,
Great
and
point.
the thing is that authors do this in different contexts. Like Tolkien did not work out any of the economics of Middle Earth. We have no information whatsoever on King Aragorn's tax policy, and we don't want it, despite blithering by George Martin. But Tolkien made his world feel real by going very deep into mythology, into the languages, and into the cultures. And doing so, he worked out a lot of stuff that didn't make it into the book. And by doing that, it gave the book a feeling of reality.
Yes.
Well, hard science fiction means that, maybe you're going to go into different stuff, but by going into stuff, you can inject reality. So I went very deep into the astrodynamics. I went very deep into the technology, and I went extremely deep into the AI stuff because my degree is in computer science. So that was my comfort zone. But when you do that stuff, even if you do only a little bit, it injects a feeling of believability and credibility into your writing. So even if you're not going to do the whole full hard science fiction where you're having your wife, who's a mathematician, create spreadsheets to calculate orbital insertion burns, relativistic time compression, you can still read a little bit of the science and talk about it in a little bit of a more realistic way. And it can help you in your semi-hard science fiction or in your soft science fiction, and it enriches the reader experience. So I would say, even if the idea of writing hard science fiction intimidates you, go look at that Atomic Rockets website and just read some of the stuff, and maybe it makes you have a cool idea. Even if it's a cool idea in a soft science fiction or a fantasy universe.
I love that. You're keeping the options open. I have to say, my wonderful other half popped in. Thank you, love. Popped in here to show us some love. That's wonderful. She's taking care of the 7-month-old, so she must have had a second, because there's not many, right, with a 7-month-old. So for those who are tuning in that may not be aware or recognize or know exactly what your book Theft of Fire is about. Would you give us a general overview of Theft of Fire?
Well, it's the first in the Orbital Space series, which starts with petty criminal gets blackmailed and ends up with technological singularity in the fate of the galaxy. So it goes quite a distance, but it is not a recapitulation of classic science fiction, but sort of a love letter to it. Sort of,
Okay.
this is a space adventure in a near future universe where humanity has colonized the solar system, and you get to see, what the 22nd century might be like, and, discover that people are still people in the 22nd century, and they do people stuff.
Yes. I love that. I love that you
Yeah.
said that. That's a wonderful kind of summation.
I went deep into the psychology as well.
I can tell. It's been such a pleasurable experience that there's so many different aspects I could sit and just gush about. But that really was the overall, and I'm so glad that you talked about it. So you sit down, you're starting writing this book. Now, I don't know how far back you started writing this book, but what does your writing process look like?
Well, as a software engineer, I use a lot of the same principles and actually tools that software engineers use to write software. So, we all know there's gardeners and architects as writers, and the gardeners are the front to back writers who sort of, they start from the beginning and they have no idea where they're going, and they just sort of take it as it comes.
Freaks of nature.
These would be your Stephen Kings, your George Martins, and so forth.
Pantsers.
And then, what's that?
The pantsers. Pantsers. Like pantsers.
Pantsers, gardeners. I call them front to back writers.
I love that.
And I am the other kind. I am a general to specific writer. So I put everything in source control, and I have a design document, and I typically, for a novel, and I'm writing my second one now, so it's not a huge backlog, but the process is starting to solidify. Typically for a novel so far, I write about 25 to 30,000 words that the reader never sees.
Okay, yep.
And that's just notes, outlines, summary, ideas, backgrounds. So I'm very systematic. And I am a planner. And of course, a plan is a list of things that don't happen. So you constantly have to be revising the plan, but the plan is, but you still have a plan to revise, because if you don't have that, you're just sort of winging it. Sure. And so the whole series is planned out. Oh, I have actually written the last scene of the last chapter of the last book, and I know exactly how it ends.
I love that.
I know how I get there. So when I'm writing a novel, I'm just filling in the detail strokes.
That gives you the creative freedom, right? So I found my process to be similar to yours. I've tried the pantsing or the gardening, and it just does not work for me. I forget a lot of things. I have to have a systematic way of going about writing my novel. And I love what you said. You know how things are going to end, and that gives you kind of the creative freedom right through the middle, or wherever you start, to kind of make things go towards that ending.
Well, each style, gardener and architect, has a characteristic weakness. And the weakness of the gardener style is that you have trouble with your endings, because you have trouble making your beginnings agree with your endings. Okay. Because when you wrote the beginning, You didn't know what the ending was.
Mm.
So the beginning doesn't properly foreshadow the ending. It doesn't rhyme. So what you do, if you're not lazy and, sort of supporting your creativity with massive piles of cocaine or whatever, then what you do is you go back, and once you've written the end, you go back and you fix your beginning so that it agrees with the ending, so that it works in this satisfying arc. Now, that works just fine. But then if you are a Gardner type writer and you're doing a multi-book series, you can get yourself in trouble.
Okay.
Because now the first books are already finished and set in stone, and you don't know how it ends, and you don't know how to get there, and you can't go back and fix the beginning. So sometimes you have writers who are gardeners, and they will have very, very unsatisfying endings because they're having to pull something out of left field.
That makes sense.
Or they can have trouble finishing their series at all, as we have seen recently with certain noticeable figures who are a lot better at coming up with excuses than they are at coming up with endings.
Sure.
Now, the architect process isn't perfect either. It has its own flaw. And that flaw is making your plots agree with your characters. Because when you have a plan for how the plot is supposed to go, if you're not careful, you can fall into this trap of having your characters do things so the plot can happen. And what you'd have to do then is go back and either rewrite your character so they would do that, or rewrite your plot so that it's something that your character would do.
Ooh, I have never thought of that stick up there. That's a great point. I had never thought of that. Never been talked to about that either, because wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes so much sense.
I have to revise my plans quite a bit, because as I write, I discover, okay, I don't think this action that I planned in broad strokes is quite in character for this character, now that I have penciled in some of the details of what happens before. So I have to tweak things a little bit. And this process of tweaking things is constant. So it's not like one of these styles is superior to the other. Although, if you're doing a multi-book series, be an architect if you can.
Sure.
It's that they have their characteristic strengths and weaknesses, and you can be lazy and allow those weaknesses to make it into the final book, or you can go back and fix your shit.
Wow. I like that, because that's the first kind of like honest speak about kind of both sides. I have lots of accounts of both sides, but that's kind of like, I would say, the most honest.
Well, and this is I'm going to ramble about this a bit, because
go ahead.
I'm on a roll now.
Absolutely.
This fix your shit thing is a very deeply held principle for me, because one of the things that we see in the indie scene as it blossoms is that there's this emphasis on one of the early ways that people discovered to get rich was to have this huge sort of back catalog and find a very narrow audience for that will buy all your stuff.
Yeah.
So we have this movement called 20 to 50K, where you're supposed to write 20 novels and then you make 50K a year or 50K a month.
I've never heard of that.
Or whatever it is. But what this does is this encourages people to churn out 3 or 4 novels a year. Well, if you're churning out 3 or 4 novels a year, my friend, you are not going back and fixing your stuff. You are not polishing. You are putting out product that still has the machine tool marks on it.
Mm.
And I think that indie authors are sometimes reluctant to say to each other, because it's seen as negative or petty or non-constructive or just plain rude to say, hey, this thing, this product has the tool marks on it. You need to sand and polish it.
Yeah.
And, I'm a perfectionist.
Okay.
I can't stand to put something out if it doesn't feel right to me. So I can't do this churn out novels quickly and have lots of product kind of approach. I just can't make myself do it. And,
Sure.
I have friends who make 6 figures a month, churning out novels very quickly.
Wow.
And, cool guys, very smart, but that's not for me.
Sure.
And so I have gambled my career on this idea that really sweating over a novel and trying to make it the best novel that you can is still possible to succeed that way, like it was in the 20th century. I've gambled my career on this, and we will see.
That's honest too. That's being honest.
Yeah. When I talk about flaws in each style of writing and saying you have to go back and rewrite and fix your shit, that is my general philosophy. It's go back and fix your shit and go back and fix your shit again until you're sitting there with this manuscript where you're saying to yourself, I can't think of a way with my current skill set to make this better. I can't think of one. And that's when you put it out there. And that's when you get a story that really starts to resonate with readers. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm so talented. I don't think I am. I think I'm just perfectionist.
Well, I think everybody, especially every author, kind of brings that personal aspect, but I think it's another thing to be honest about it. So I applaud that, and your process is your process, and I think that every author I've talked to is confident in their process, at least on face value. I'm sure some people come through and change that. But not
I
in
think
the way.
I think there's a lot of new authors who are not very confident.
I
And
think
they're
you're right,
taking a lot of advice from people who have been in the business for 30 years, repeating the same mistakes for 30 years and calling it experience. And they're saying things like, just write and then go over it once and then publish it and move on to the next one. They're saying, make sure you get into lots of anthologies to get your name out there among the dozen people who still buy anthologies, because nobody buys anthologies anymore.
Right.
They're saying all this stuff. So, that's not really the path I am taking as a new author, or that I would recommend to other new authors. One of the really, really enlightening moments I had was I like guns. So I watch a lot of gun related videos.
Me too, brother.
And there's a competitive pistol champion named Ben Steiger. And he is a very blunt spoken character, has a very interesting YouTube channel. And someone asked him, how did you become good so quickly? And he released a video answering this question that had 2 points that really resonated with me. And I will share them in the hopes that they will resonate with some of the other indie authors who listen to this. And, number one is, he said he went and looked at the guys who are really, really good, typically on video, because he wasn't training with them. They're scattered all over the country.
Yeah.
And he said, these guys didn't look like super athletes. They didn't look like genetically gifted people. They just looked like ordinary dudes who were making the right movements. So his idea that he took from this is there's no reason I am physically incapable of performing like this right now if I just knew what to do.
Mm.
And I took that to writing because it's like, okay, we can all type on a keyboard.
Sure.
So any one of us, if we make the right choices of what words to use, can produce the greatest novel ever and, be the next Tolkien or the next Heinlein or whoever. We're all physically capable of that. The only thing holding us back is our knowledge of what to do. So we learn what to do, we can do that. And the second point he made was that there were a lot of people who had been doing this a lot of years, and they'd gotten a little bit better, and they're all very eager to share advice. Like, oh, I've been doing this for 30 years or whatever, and this person is like a USPSA Class B shooter, or they're like a sharpshooter in IDPA, and guys who shoot pistols will know what that means, but it's a thing. And it's like, if you are not at the absolute top of your game, I don't want your advice.
Right.
And as an author, something that I would say, and I try to sugarcoat this a little when I'm talking to people in person, but this is how I feel, if someone is not such a successful celebrity author that I'm not going to be in the same room with him at a con or whatever, like, I don't want your advice.
Okay.
If you're not a household name, I don't want your advice, because that is the fence that I am swinging for. And whether I can hit it all the way there or not, it remains to be seen. But if somebody's been doing this for 10, 20 years and they're a mid-lister and, nobody's heard of them and they've sold, they haven't sold millions of books,
Sure.
They're not this wild, then why would I want to listen to their advice? I want to listen to advice from, the guy who does a Kickstarter to publish these 4 novels that he wrote in his spare time, and he gets $42 million for that.
Yeah.
And we all know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If you're not on that level, I don't want your advice, because that's the level I'm swinging for.
No, that makes sense. It does.
And that doesn't mean I think I deserve to be there, or that I think I'm inevitably going to get there. It just means that I'm trying. And so I'm going to pay a lot of attention to the advice from people who have gotten there, and not so much attention to the guy who's beside me at the con at a table selling books.
Sure. No,
because
that makes
that's
complete
not
sense.
that's where I am now, but that's not where I want to be forever.
There is, anybody who listens to that and they're like, oh, this or that, there's nothing wrong with that, because that is the truth with anybody who, whether it's playing baseball or writing a book, that is the difference between someone who is going to take the advice of somebody who's just one step above them or right next to them. But you're shooting for the stars, and I get that.
You have to try to be great.
Yeah,
you have to try to be great, because
you're
certain whether you succeed at that or not, you're not going to be better by trying to be mediocre. You have to try to be great.
And I love that. I do. I really understand and respect that. So what are you working on right now, and what's next for you? What's coming up? What are you working on at the moment?
Well, a couple of projects in the works. There is the audiobook for Theft of Fire.
Very excited.
Which I mentioned, and I will be directing that personally.
Yes.
so that I will bring the same level of perfectionism, and the actors will probably be tearing their hair out,
Hey,
at the
I've
end,
heard
because
similar stories.
I am going to Kubrick the shit out of this and make them do the line 200 times if I have to.
I'm old enough to know
So,
who Kubrick is. I
yeah,
am.
yeah,
I
yeah.
am.
So, there's that, but what that will be pulling me away briefly from is the major work, which is, and also I have to get on Twitter every day and get my name out there, because any day
Sure.
I'm not on Twitter, my sales get halved.
Mhm.
That really matters.
Very much
Um,
marketing.
yeah, marketing, writing, getting your name out there, getting your writing in front of people. But the main project, of course, is the second book,
Mhm.
Box of Trouble.
Yes, Box of Trouble.
And I have, by word count, I have about 56,000 words at the moment.
Solid.
Some of them are summary, others are literal text. The other night, I just finished. Well, I periodically go back and rewrite a summary of the book, just to sort of recapitulate what my current plan is.
Mhm.
So I just last night I finished a summary of about 6,500 words, which goes through the whole novel in a pretty good level of detail. So I've got all my major story problems solved. I've got all my major events worked out, and that's kind of helping to get the pace going a little bit faster. I did have some difficulties at first, because obviously there was the distraction of being published for the first time, and then the novel starts taking off. I'm just absolutely losing my mind, and all these people are calling, wanting to interview
Sure.
me and wanting projects, and just this big publicity spike that it was kind of hard to wrap my mind around.
Sure.
And there was the distraction of that, and then as I finally was able to sit down and start writing the second book of what was originally planned to be a trilogy, I
Mhm.
very quickly realized that all the ideas I had were not going to fit into one book. So it became two books, and of course, two books is not one book sliced in half. They
Yeah.
all need their own arcs and internal. Everything has to work, so that quite a bit of re-engineering had to be done.
So a
But
duology is
now,
what it's planned to be.
what's that? What's that?
So it's a 2-book. It's going to be 2 books, not 3.
No. The book in the middle of the originally planned trilogy turned into two books.
Oh,
So
okay.
now it's
Okay.
going to be four.
It's going to be 4 now. Okay. Because
Yeah.
I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
It's got Box of Trouble, and then it's got Oceans of Stars. So the middle is
Yeah.
going to be 2 books.
The middle, Box of Trouble is going to be the second book of 4, not the second book of 3.
That's exciting as a reader,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah, and that enables me to go through the full arc sort of the way that I wanted to do it, but all of the rubble, all of the fallout from that decision is now starting to really get cleared up, so I'm being able to blaze ahead and hopefully be closer to done when we get the audiobook out, and when we find out if I actually win the Prometheus Award or not. And so I'm targeting the end of this year. Maybe.
Okay. No.
It might slip to the first quarter of next year.
As a reader, I have to say that that's exciting, because as a guy, I don't just have people on my channel that I'm like, oh, one and done. Like, I plan to have you back many times. So, talking with you.
So I'm having fun.
Oh man, I have to say that this has been one of the most fun, open, comfortable conversations I've had, because we're very much on the same wavelength, and to hear that, so I look at this and I'm like, 3 books, that's awesome, but if I hear 4 or 5, that's even better, right? So you've got a fan in me. You've got a fan on.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, when I'm done with the 4 books, then it will be on to the next project. And I
Yes.
hope by that time I will have convinced people that stuff that I put out should be worth reading. So when I'm done with Orbital Space, there will be different things to get excited about. I'm not sure exactly what that will be, but I think I do have sort of an urge to try my hand at some fantasy.
Oh, I was so I came into this in this interview hoping to hear that. I promise you.
Yeah, because I do love some fantasy. I mean, you asked me about books, and I focused on science fiction because you asked about science fiction. But Robert Jordan is a big favorite. The old Terry Brooks stuff was fun. I read those when I was younger. Tolkien, of course, and
very excited.
Janny Wirtz's Empire series.
She's been on my channel. You should go back and watch the interview. You should watch the interview. She's incredible.
Yeah, I paid very close attention to some of her stuff when I was figuring out, okay, how am I going to do a female point of view character? Because there's some female characters who I feel I'm pretty satisfied with how they came out in Theft of Fire.
Should be.
But in Box of Trouble, one of those characters becomes a point of view character.
Okay.
And it's like that really, really was Miranda. And that really, you don't want to take that lightly.
Sure.
You don't want to take writing an opposite sex point of view character lightly.
I like that you're saying that.
Yeah, that can really make or break a book. I've seen a lot of books by very good authors where they just kind of fell a little bit flat because you have these problems with men writing women or problems with women writing men, which don't get called out as much, but they exist.
Yes.
So, Janny Wirtz and her Empire series was somebody that I took a lot of inspiration from for how do I write the female point of view.
Wow.
And let's get some inspiration for how do I make a heroic female character who does exciting things in the story and is admirable without trying to make one of these sort of, politically correct action girls.
Sure.
Where she's going to beat up a whole bunch of men in her first appearance in the novel to show that, she can do anything a man can do backwards and in heels, and it becomes this big sort of chip on the shoulder thing. And it's not really fun to read. Yeah. And, I was very careful about that with Miranda in the first novel. And I don't know how far you've gotten, but
I know what you're saying. Yes, because
she is not a warrior.
No,
she is not a skilled fighter. She is not a physically tough person, but okay, let's write the story and give her important things to do that use her skill set.
That's exactly it. It's like you learn what she's good at and you exploit that, not necessarily against anybody or based on anybody other's opinion.
I think writers who write female characters like only as badass fighters where they're basically men with tits, I think that shows a failure of imagination and a real lack of respect for femininity.
Yes, dude.
Because what you're saying is that I can't imagine how to create a feminine character who is a hero.
There's women that can do more than men.
I can't imagine heroism that doesn't involve masculinity. And that is such a tragic underselling of your female characters. And it's just lazy.
I have to say that I agree with that, because there are so many amazing things that women can do that a man has no business doing, and so many things that a man can do that,
well, it
it's
has
just
to start with this, writing both male and female characters has to start with admitting to yourself and not being afraid to say that men and women are inherently different.
They're
And the
different.
difference matters.
Yes.
And 10 years ago, you said that, you would have a whole bunch of people screeching at you.
Yeah.
But it's a plainly obvious fact. And even the people who are screeching at you know it.
I've watched my wife do things that I could never do, and she's watched the same for me. We are different.
Yeah, and it's not just about being able to do different things. It's men and women want different things.
That's true. We think differently. We want different things.
You can't create a believable character of the opposite sex until you understand that your wants and your patterns of thought are not universal. They're you. So someone of the opposite sex is going to engage with the world differently.
How boring would that
be? You have to be willing to admit that and able to understand that. And that goes to what I think really the primary skill of a good writer is. It's empathy.
Oh, yes, dude. Yes.
Yeah. And I don't mean like compassion. I don't mean feeling sorry for people. I mean empathy in the technical sense of looking at somebody and having a theory of mind where you understand how they feel, what they think, and why they think and feel that way. Because that's what allows you to create believable characters that are different from you.
Devon,
if you can't do that, then you end up being one of these formulaic writers where you write protagonists that are just, 10 different novels with 10 different versions of yourself interacting with stereotypes.
I have to say, thank God we're different. Thank God that men and women are different, because there's so many
and it's not just sex. It's culture, it's age groups, it's backgrounds, it's professions. You have to think about, what does the world look like to this person that is very different from me? Because you are using this empathy skill to create the experience, but also what you're trying to create for the reader is this empathy experience. I wrote Theft of Fire the way I did. Yes, okay, I will hold it up again. Are you satisfied? Agent. One of the reasons I wrote it the way I did is I wanted people to really be able to understand what it feels like to be Marcus Warnock.
Yes.
What the worlds look like to him. And I felt that would be a very engaging experience for people to have, and it would drive the novel. And it's like, if you can do that for a lot of different characters, then you can write a lot of different stuff and have it all be very engaging. So, I have studied some very skilled female writers writing female characters very closely to say, okay, here's how I'm going to turn Miranda into a point of view character and make that come off in a convincing way.
I love that. And I'm so glad that you touched on that. So I have a really good understanding of what I've read. I'm almost done with the novel, by the way. I'm really enjoying it. And I just wanted to say this will definitely not be our last chat, as long as you're okay with that.
Oh, absolutely.
This has been a very eye-opening. I've learned some new things from you, things that I didn't expect, which are lovely. and also a lot of things that I knew and couldn't wait to talk about. So I want to say I got to get up semi early. We've got a 5-year-old, we've got a 3-year-old, we've got a 1-year-old, and
Yeah,
we have
you
a
got your work cut out
7-month-old.
for you.
So I want to say that, well, they're fine. They're actually quiet, but I wanted to say that I've had an excellent chat with you, and it's been far exceeding my expectations.
Yeah, I
I'm a
enjoyed
fan
this a
of
lot.
yours. I'm a fan of yours, Devons. I'm a fan of anything that you do, and this will not be our last chat. I've got some really fun ideas that I would like to explore, and I will be messaging you and all of your people. So I want to say
Awesome.
thank you, man.
Awesome. Well, you're welcome, and thank you for inviting me on. It's been a great experience, and I love to talk about these things to anyone with the patience to listen.
You got it, man. Of course, of course. And I can tell just from the lovely people who were here live commenting over there. Thank you so much. And for you guys that will watch this on replay, thank you so much as well. We will be back tomorrow with Scott Palmer at, I believe, 8:30. But Devon, thank you so much. And everybody live here, thank you so much. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you, Devon.